All right. Hi, I'm here today with Merlin Crosley from UNSW, and my name is Bianca Raby, and I'm the CEO and founder of OPEDA, and we're here just to have a conversation about teaching and media after a really thought-provoking article Merlin published in Campus Morning Mail a couple of weeks ago. So Merlin, maybe you can just quickly introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, so I'm Merlin Crossley, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic Quality at the University of New South Wales. By training, I started as a university lecturer in 1995, teaching molecular biology, and I've sort of been in universities ever since.
Awesome. So it's great to have your perspective in this conversation, because media has been one of the things that OPEDA's really tried to, lead with and get excited about, and trying to help people understand how to create everlasting media that can actually get an ROI. So I was really excited to see your article. It sparked a lot of things that we've sort of been talking about internally, and how the conversations we have with our clients. And I think one of my first points I wanted to pick up from your article was this idea that content is everywhere. And I've often been saying for a while that it's not content that's king anymore, it's curation that's king. And so how do you see the universities dealing with this problem where they used to be the gatekeepers of the content, and now the content is freely available? And if we think about it in terms of media, you can just type into YouTube or Google or anything a question, and it will spit you out some responses. Whether or not those responses are accurate, that's another conversation, but you will get an answer to your questions. And so in the past, we used to go to libraries, or we'd go to people wiser than us. So how are you seeing academia deal with this particular content saturation problem?
Yeah, so I think it's a real challenge. I think that students can't make their own courses very easily because they get lost. There's too much information, as you said, and not all of it is along a coherent pathway. So I think about the things I like doing when I'm on a plane. What I like to do is get a box set. If I'm going overseas, I like to get a box set and watch episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. I love the narrative. I love to get into it. I don't like watching 3 different films. And I think students also want to get that coherent, full narrative. And I agree with you. They need a curated product, and they need something that makes sense to them, and each bit builds on the last bit. So that's the academic job, to do that.
Which brings me to the next part of your article I wanted to pick out, which is this academic pride idea, because there's all one thing to say, let's curate what's already out there, but that actually means that you're not really the author of the content per se. So if you're curating just what's already been created, there's little, there is a way to do it, but there's little way to kind of put your flavor on things. So that is kind of one of the biggest challenges is for teachers and educators anywhere, but especially academics, is that they have a particular way that they want to deliver that information. And of course, they're not going to find it in the internet because it's got to be created by them.
I think that's right. Academics, like all people, have pride in their work. And I put it, it's a bit like this. It's that if you're going out with friends, you know, people make jokes. You might tell one formulaic joke, oh, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, that sort of thing. But you would also make spontaneous jokes. And I think what will happen in courses, there'll be some curated products where the teacher will say, hey, this is the best short video I've ever seen. You should all see this. But the other times, the academic will be leading the person between those sort of bought-in highlights. So it'll be a mixture. And we do that a bit already.
Yeah, and I guess that's a really way of saying blended. I mean, that is a blended learning experience where you have, you know, some stuff that is done asynchronously and some stuff that's done synchronously. And I think what you're hitting on there is the design of the program around how do you bring in that academic personality into the course, but also not have to recreate everything. Have you seen that being done really well? Like, where have you seen that work? Where have you had academics with the media and been able to do that?
So there's 2 things. In the old days, we do it with a textbook. We'd show a couple of pictures from a textbook, would say, here, have a look at this, and go away and read chapter 2, and we'll discuss that next week. Nowadays, we see it more with videos. So people will say, okay, let's have a chat about this. Now let's watch this video together. Wow, what did we get out of that? And those sort of things. People mostly get timetabled in 1 hour or 2 hour slots. The idea that everything would be 7-minute videos, because people say that's a good time to concentrate. It doesn't happen. The students don't always, in my experience, seem to like too many 7-minute. They get lost.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because we keep saying bite size, but I guess that whole argument relates to the just-in-time learning idea and the on-the-fly learning idea. So are you sort of saying that if you were to sit down, as students to sit down and to do an online course or a blended course, they're going to be allocating a couple of hours, so they want to just get through things, right? Is that what you're kind of referring to?
Yeah, I think so. I think a series of sort of, good long jogs is probably better than, a sprint 20 times a day. I think that people just get too confused. I think this is the real challenge. There's just too much information, too many paths. People can't weigh what's significant and really allow that to absorb too many punchlines, So I think this thing about reading a good book, there's still something in that.
Yep, I agree. We've had some clients come to us and, academics or subject matter experts, and they've given us, 10 additional readings, and I'm like, they're not. If there's 10 of them, they obviously are not important because you would have integrated them into the learning outcomes. If they're not constructively aligned, if they don't match, don't put them there because you're just going to drown, because there are some students who will do every single one of them, and then freak out that they can't get the assignments done, right? Because there's too much content, right?
Yep. It's the same with museums and things. There's some museums that show you, everything, and the other says, we're just going to take the best Grecian urn we could find and we'll just put one there. And sometimes that's better, but it's hard. It's hard to make those calls.
It's definitely hard, and especially when this hasn't been as much of a necessity. I often say, I use this kind of joke in some of my presentations about, who has a bigger attention span, a goldfish or a human? And now it's actually a goldfish. And so we've dropped our attention span more and more every year. And so we're getting worse at kind of paying attention. But there's also something to your argument, I really believe in sitting down and being focused. And that's actually part of the discipline of learning, right?
And to do it again and again and again. So when you learn a new skill, like juggling or something like that, you have to just practice stage one again and again and again. And sometimes in teaching, you can actually give someone the same information 3 times in slightly different ways. Those sort of things, iterative ways of doing that.
Yeah, great. And so how do you see media being used by academia? Because I really liked your argument about, they can't invest in these big platforms because they're never going to get the ROI on them for these, big video based kind of masterclass model type things, because that's not their business model. So how do you see video being used? Because we know that the students are asking for video, but we also know they're not asking for recorded lectures. So what is the middle ground, do you think?
I think it's a really hard question. So there's 2 different angles. What do the students want? Then what's best for their learning?
Yeah.
And there's a third angle. What can be done in a financially stable, sustainable way? And these, so you've got to get, what is it? It's like you've got to choose 2 of those 3. It's hard to get all 3 of them. And I'm troubled by this. I mean, you would have, since you've read my article, sometimes I think through writing. I don't have the answer to how we solve that financial one. And that really bothers me a little bit. I think we will gradually work out what students like best by putting it up and watching. We'll probably put a range of things up and find some of them are never used and some of them most of the students use. So I think we'll get that answer. But I am worried about this cost of constantly trying to make, high quality digital products. And I think we need to get a sort of production line way of doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that is the biggest problem I think we face, because especially, we do sell full production as part of our suite at Opeda, and it is costly, and I've been in there at every stage of that process, and it's time consuming. And to get that video to be where you want it to be, it takes a lot of learning and effort. And so it isn't something that you can just do with a couple $100s. It's a big investment. So
it is, isn't it? And we were sort of spoiled, because using a blackboard or even writing a book wasn't that expensive. I mean, producing and publishing, distributing a book, that's pretty serious, but it still wasn't the same as making a film.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got this interesting play between edutainment, I call it, right? And I'm sure you've used that term before. Is that I guess I definitely get on my soapbox sometimes about, no, what is good for learning is you create the video to learn, not to entertain, but at the same time you can't have it not have some of those entertainment elements, otherwise people will drop out. So you have to bridge that somehow.
I agree. I think if it's really painful to watch, the students will first drift off mentally, and then they'll drop out physically. So, and also I think humans connect with each other. I sort of think of football coaches. People play hard because they care what their coach thinks of them, and they don't just want to take a video of how to be a better footballer. They want someone watching them and saying, you did well today, or you did well, except hey, why don't you run a bit more? You're not keeping up, and then they can improve that aspect. I think we need that feedback, human feedback.
And that is why we use video sometimes, to put a face to a course, right? Especially if it's a completely self-paced course. I say, put your face to it so they feel that there's a human behind it. And that is one of the elements. Even if it doesn't teach, it does bring that human element. But I've also seen where that's been abused, because I remember reading an article maybe 6 months ago where somebody had said they thought they were speaking to their lecturer that was in the videos, but that person had died 3 years ago. And so they were talking to they thought they were talking to the person on the camera that was speaking to them through the videos, but they weren't. And I thought, how disappointing would that be as a student to find out that the person that's teaching you is actually not here anymore, and the person that you're asking help from is not that person. So that's an interesting thing that particular provider decided to do, is to keep these videos in and keep the illusion up that person was still teaching. So yeah, we've got to be careful of that too.
And one wonders, how big a role AI has with artificial teachers. I think it has a role, but I think it is a little bit bounded. You want to know when you're asking a bot and when you're asking a living and breathing person who cares about you. I think the bot has its role, but it can't masquerade as a living person.
No, I've often had that when I'm speaking to a company. I think I'm speaking to a bot, so I'm really direct. I'm super direct with my language. I've got no fluff in it. And then I realize I'm speaking to a human, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I was really rude to you. I'm so sorry. I would never have spoken to you that way if I thought you were a human.
Yeah, we've got all this ahead of us, I think.
I know, it's exciting, right? But also scary and unnerving and all of those things. Anyway, thank you so much for your time today. I know you've beamed in from a Botanic Gardens on your way between meetings, so I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience has really enjoyed the conversation.